Hello, and we welcome you back into another hour of Newsmax Now on this Memorial Day.
And we thank you for spending some time with us on this day of reflection and remembrance for those who died while serving our country. And throughout the day, right here on Newsmax TV, we will be checking in on events around the world to honor the bravest men and women from generations past and present. And you're watching Newsmax Now on this Memorial Day edition.
It's good to have everybody with us. President Obama, as you just saw there, honoring the men and women by laying a wreath at the grave of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. We'll have more on Memorial Day coming up, but first we turn our attention to Texas now, where another day of storms battered that state. And also, folks are expecting more storms there. Officials say they continue right now to search for at least 12 people reported missing today after a series of deadly storms hit that region.
We have impending weather concerns. We're expecting a substantial amount of rain later today.
It seems never to end. There are several cities in Texas are claiming May as the wettest month in history.
Meanwhile, a tornado touches down in a Mexican city along the border with Texas today. Take a look at this. These are the first images. Wow, look at that. Coming in from the city of Acuña, you can see a flipped over car right here. Officials say at least 10 people died.
President Obama speaking today during services at Arlington National Cemetery. The commander-in-chief says most Americans do not understand the sacrifices made by U.S. servicemen and women.
A sacrifice that preserves the freedoms we too often take for granted. Few know what it's like to take a bullet for a buddy, or to live with the fact that he or she took one for you.
Well, President Obama says our fallen soldiers represent the best of who we are as Americans.
Meanwhile, country music legend Charlie Daniels says he's fed up with President Obama, specifically the president's refusal to blame Muslims for terrorism. Daniels says, lock and load America. Trouble is on the way.
Well, when it comes to fighting ISIS, Senator John McCain doesn't think much of the current White House strategy.
There is no strategy. And anybody that says that there is, I'd like to hear what it is, because it certainly isn't apparent.
And McCain also chided the president for saying the biggest enemy we have is climate change. Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter is taking the Iraqis to task for the fall of Ramadi. Speaking to CNN, he said the Iraqi forces showed no will to fight, and he says they were vastly outnumbered the ISIS forces, but yet still retreated.
Cleveland is relatively calm after a weekend of protest. People took to the streets after a white police officer was found not guilty in the shooting death of 2 unarmed black men. Police say in all, 71 people were arrested during those protests on charges ranging from aggravated rioting to obstruction of justice. The protest started Saturday after Officer Michael Brillo was found not guilty. He was one of several officers who fired at a car following a chase in 2012.
Protesters continue to hit the beaches of Santa Barbara, California, rallying after a nearby oil pipeline broke and spilled more than 105 gallons of crude oil on the local beach and into the Pacific Ocean. That spill left a slick on the water about 9 miles long.
Former President George W. Bush did not lie about weapons of mass destruction to justify the war in Iraq. That's what journalist Bob Woodward is now saying, speaking to Fox News. He says his own year-and-a-half investigation shows that Bush was actually skeptical about claims that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Instead, he says the reason the U.S. entered the war was a belief at the time that it would be over in a week or two. One thing we can guarantee about the controversy over the NSA's bulk collection of phone data, nothing will be done about it this week. The Senate failed to act Saturday to extend the bulk collection of phone data under the Patriot Act. It also failed to pass a bill that would replace the bulk collections with a more targeted program that would stop the government from holding all that data.
The Freedom Act is the only way to do it. The House has passed it. The president wants it. All of the intelligence personnel have agreed to it.
But the Senate has now gone home without passing anything, and authorization for several of the intelligence gathering programs under the Patriot Act runs out on Sunday.
And an early win in the 2016 presidential cycle for Dr. Ben Carson. He won a recent straw poll. The Southern Republican Leadership Conference held their strong poll. He beat Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker by 5 points and Senator Ted Cruz by nearly 10 points. 4 years ago, The eventual nominee for the GOP, Mitt Romney, won this same straw poll. And with us now on this Memorial Day, Newsmax Prime host J.D. Hayworth. J.D., it's great to be with you.
It is good to be here on the desk with you. Thanks very much.
Nice tie today, very appropriate.
Miss Mary picks out the right tie. Earlier this morning, we were at a Memorial Day service, and it was good to see hundreds of people out to remember the fallen today.
Yeah, just a moment or two of silence, as we heard two of our guests mention earlier, is appropriate remembrance. Wanted to talk to you also, J.D., some news happening way over on the other side of the world, but it could be perhaps a preview of what we might see here in the very near future. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott talking about terrorism, appointing two new high-level positions on his government as well, and talking about ways Australia is now having to deal with its migrant problem. What do you think?
Well, Australia has long been, as part of the coalition and one of the leading U.S. allies, post 9/11. I can recall visiting down under and seeing the leadership at that point in time offering ads saying, if you say something, and that kind of down under mode. But as you see right here, he's talking about stopping boats coming in, Operation Sovereign Borders, and the challenge for Australia as a continent surrounded by water, it is daunting, but he has people in place to deal with this, and the reality is the Australians, and I think Tony Abbott, is very serious about border security, and you will note that if you've ever visited Australia, they are incredibly serious about what you bring with you.
Well, I know a number of my friends who studied abroad there in college and loved it so much they wanted to stay and get a job, but found it very difficult because of the rules in Australia.
Well, the Australians are interesting people, and they certainly are a staunch ally, and I think that we would do well to follow the lead of Tony Abbott.
You see a clear him able to vocalize a clear vision on where he wants to take his country on this issue, and you don't see that as much.
Well, I think while so many Republican aspirants to the presidency would love to be called Reagan-esque, I think that Tony Abbott is a kind of interesting mixture of Reagan and Thatcher down under. I really think as a conservative, as a communicator, and as someone who has clear objectives, he is among the best in the world at leadership.
All right, let's talk about politics closer here to home. John Kasich, a constant, reoccurring topic for our discussion here. Let's take a listen to what the Ohio governor had to say on the Sunday shows over the weekend.
John, I'm the most experienced in the field with being an executive running a big state like Ohio, dealing with problems like Cleveland, at the same time being in Congress, balancing the budget.
If you're not the nominee, you're going to be looked at as a possible vice presidential candidate.
Forget it.
Would you do it?
Forget it.
No way?
Forget it,
no
John.
Way?
I don't play for second.
I'm going to save this tape, Governor Kasich, and we'll be back when it all happens. Thank you very much.
Don't count me out, John.
All right, nobody wants to say that they'd be happy with a vice presidential nomination, but you know, if he was offered, he'd probably take it.
Well, that's a long way between now and what happens, ironically, in Cleveland with
Was that
Republicans.
inappropriate, though, for him to automatically kind of discount?
No, if you are running for president of the United States, you don't hedge your bets, especially if you're thinking and preparing to go to major donors saying, I'm getting ready to run. You're not going, well, you know, I'm going to...
No. I mean, the person that was interviewing him.
Oh,
was that wrong to discredit him and say, you know, come on, you take vice president?
That's every pundit's favorite question for a presidential candidate, because somebody's going to have to be wrong. Somebody's going to have to be the vice president.
And it's always fun to have the video.
But like you said, no one's going to say, well, yeah, if I didn't get it, I'd settle for a second
At this
place.
point in time, nobody who is running for the presidency even wants to think about the number 2 spot. Kasich is right in terms of his resume. I served with him in Congress. Ironically, little known fact, Kasich was elected in '82, the only Republican pickup that year, defeating a Democrat incumbent. He was John McCain's campaign manager when McCain was elected as president of the freshman Republican class in '82. And then by the time I got to Congress, he was chairman of the Budget Committee, 4 successive balanced budgets that he authored. Then, of course, was in business and on the tube at Fox News, and now in his second term as a remarkably popular governor in Ohio. He has a very impressive resume.
All right.
I'm sure we'll hear more from Governor Kasich.
You do, and you have a very popular show, Newsmax Prime. What
That's
do you got
right, and
today?
we're looking forward to having John on. He's not on tonight, though. With Memorial Day, we've got some interesting discussion. Ellis Hinniken on the left, Larry Elder on the right, some of the items into news. Brandon Webb, who is a U.S. Navy SEAL, and the mother of Mark Lee, the fallen SEAL in Iraq. Debbie Lee will be with us. It's a big show, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific.
See you then,
Always good
JD.
to have you, JD.